Okay. So we will summarize what we learned in the last class on Thursday, and then hopefully we will take it from there. We talked about beta oxidation of a saturated fatty acid, and so if we metabolize a 16 carbon saturated fatty acid, uh, it will yield 8 molecules of acetyl coenzyme A, right? And those 8 molecules of coenzyme A will go on to get further oxidized, and eventually they will make 108 molecules of ATP. And I showed you how that number is arrived at, right? Those numbers are arrived by reaction steps that utilize one of the redox cofactors like NAD plus, FAD, etc. And so they are listed here. Okay. So acyl CoA dehydrogenase, the enzyme that actually oxidizes the fatty acid and utilizes FAD. If you have 16 carbon fatty acids, you will be doing that 7 times. So that's why 7 molecules of FADH2 you'll form. And each molecule of FADH2 makes about 1.5 molecules of ATP. So that's why the number 10.5 here, right? And similarly, the rest of the enzymes, you will see some of them are citric acid cycle enzymes as well, right? So that's how you arrive at that number 108. And then we also talked about how certain animals like gerbils here, killer whales, and camels, they have large deposits of fatty acids in them, and they utilize fatty acid metabolism in most part. And as a result of fatty acid metabolism, they also are able to produce a significant amount of dietary water that they need, that cells might need, right? And so that brings us to the question on metabolism of unsaturated fatty acids, right? And so first we will talk about monounsaturated fatty acids as shown here. This is a coenzyme A ester of oleic acid, right? It's an 18 carbon fatty acid. And you can see that there is a cis bond between 9th and 10th carbon, right? And so we will talk how this molecule will get oxidized. I just want to tell you upfront that this is not all the pathways of fatty acid oxidations that you are going to learn in this class. It's almost impossible. Okay. So sometimes, you may ask questions, is there, other forms of oxidations of fatty acids? And the answer is yes. There are some other minor fatty acid oxidation pathways. For example, there is an alpha oxidation. Okay. So let's say if you have an alkyl group at the beta carbon of a fatty acid, it basically, that alkyl group will block beta oxidation of that kind of fatty acid. And I'm not going to tell you much in details, but one such example will be phytanic acid. Okay. Phytanic acid is, comes from, if you're trying to, plants are trying to metabolize chlorophylls, you will have phytyl group there. But basically, phytanic acid is one such fatty acid where you have an alkyl group at the beta carbon. Okay, so that kind of oxidation of such branched fatty acids is usually accomplished by alpha oxidation. What about gamma omega oxidation? Omega oxidation also happens, okay? And so in some species, including some vertebrates, etc., metabolism actually begins at the carbon, if you remember, most distant from the carboxylate carbon. Remember, that's the omega carbon. And so, yeah, there are some enzymes that can carry out omega oxidation. And typically, those enzymes are found in the endoplasmic reticulum of liver and kidney cells, okay? And so, yeah, it's a minor pathway. Omega oxidation is not a major pathway. But if you have a mutation in the gene that actually makes carnitine, then it becomes a reasonably reasonably utilized pathway for fatty acid oxidations. Okay, so just keep that in mind. But let's get on with our learning for this class. So if you look at this, you can see that they are showing you the breakage of the bond, single bond. You see that three wiggly blue lines. What they are meant to show you is that bond will break between those two neighboring carbons. Okay, so that's typically what happens. So if you look at it, you can see that, oh, it makes sense, because if you do beta oxidation, you basically remove 2 carbon unit and in the activated ester form, thioester form, right? So that makes sense. It turns out that there is one unique enzyme that you typically will need, which is this enzyme called enoyl-CoA isomerase. Okay, why would you need that additional enzyme for the oxidation of monounsaturated fatty acids like this? Let's look at this. Okay, again, this is the beta oxidation pathway for the saturated fatty acids, and if you recall, it's 4 steps, right? You basically, in the first 3 steps, you make this beta keto acyl coenzyme A of the fatty acid, right? So those are the 2 carbonyl groups. That's why beta keto. If you remember, this beta carbon is the one that got oxidized, right? So 3 steps do that, and in the 4th step, thiolase will break it down using coenzyme A to produce 2 carbon fatty acid, 2 carbon acyl coenzyme A and 2 carbon short activated fatty acid, right? And you do this cycle again and again, right? So with keeping that in mind, what you need to know and what you need to do as a student is to write down and literally memorize this, all these steps and enzymes. That's the first thing you want to do, because it can help you a lot, what we are going to talk about in the next slide. So what about monounsaturated fatty acids, right? You remember, most monounsaturated fatty acids that we consume are unsaturated with a cis geometry, okay? So how do we metabolize them? So that's what they're showing you. You can see a cis double bond between the carbon number 9 and 10. Carbon number 1, if you recall, is the carboxylate carbon, right? So this is an activated ester of 18 carbon monosaturated fatty acid, oleic acid, right? So they are showing you the starting material, oleoyl coenzyme A. Oleoyl coenzyme A, remember, fatty acid must be activated before they are brought into the mitochondria for beta oxidation. So they are showing you already that activated fatty acid that will happen in the cytosol. So what will happen? Pay attention. If you pay attention, it's very easy, and I would totally recommend that you write it down yourself and work it out, okay? Don't just look at it and say you know this. So you will carry out 3 rounds of beta oxidation using the enzymes that I showed you in the previous slides, because it looks like a regular saturated fatty acid for at least 3 rounds. So how do we say 3 rounds? Here, carbon number 1, carbon number 2. That's what will be relieved, right, after first cycle. And then what will you have? You will have activated ester at the carbon number 3, right? So that's what they're showing you. You will do 3 rounds of the beta oxidations, and you will be able to release 3-acetyl coenzyme A. But when you do that, when the enzyme does that, right, carries out 3 rounds of beta oxidation, what you'll notice is that you are left with this 12 carbon fatty acid, monounsaturated fatty acid, which has a cis geometry. Okay. And if you go back and actually practiced, you will see that the double bond has to be between the alpha carbon and beta carbon, or if you want to say carbon number 2 and 3, right? If you have a double bond, trans double bond between the carbon number 2 and 3, then enoyl-CoA hydratase will accept that as a substrate and basically oxidize it. Will add water to that beta carbon, right? That's what you need. So you need to have a carbon double bond between alpha carbon and beta carbon, or carbon number 2 and 3. Now, if you look here, carbon number 1 is here, carbon number 2 is here, and carbon number 3 is there. I hope you are able to see my cursor, okay? And so, if you look here, it looks like clearly that you have a cis double bond between carbon number 3 and 4, because carbonyl carbon is carbon number 1, right? So, you have to transpose that to bring it to carbon number 2 and 3, and ideally in a trans configuration, right? So that's where this enzyme enoyl-CoA isomerase, also formerly known as delta 3 to delta 2, so delta 3 comma delta 2, enoyl-CoA isomerase is the new enzyme that you will need that will actually transpose this double bond, cis double bond, to a trans double bond on the neighboring carbon. Okay, so now you have the trans delta 2 activated fatty acid, and if you remember, trans delta 2 activated fatty acid becomes a substrate for a regular beta oxidation pathway, and therefore you will be able to carry out further 5 rounds of beta oxidation. When you do 5 rounds of beta oxidation on this trans delta 2 dodecanoyl coenzyme A, you will produce 6 molecules of acetyl coenzyme A. So 6 here and 3 on the top, total of 9 acetyl coenzyme A you produce from an 18 carbon monounsaturated fatty acid. Cool? Very easy, right? Good. But think about it. If I drew this a little bit here and there and didn't draw it the way drawn here, you will get easily confused. So what would I recommend? I recommend that you practice on a piece of paper with a pencil. Okay. What about if you have polyunsaturated fatty acids? Okay. If you have polyunsaturated fatty acids, it's slightly more complicated, but nothing to worry. You just need another enzyme. Okay. So I will show you, and it will become very clear how that happens. But key features are listed here. You will still need the enoyl-CoA isomerase enzyme, but you will need another new enzyme called 2,4-dienoyl-CoA reductase. Okay, and you will see why. Okay. Now, one thing I want to tell you at the onset is that you know that most of the polyunsaturated fatty acids that we ingest are not conjugated fatty acid. Okay. But having said that, it's not that conjugated fatty acids, we don't consume. We can consume conjugated fatty acids, from meat or dairy product. Okay. And so there are conjugated, for example, linoleic acid, where the bonds are conjugated. Look here in this fatty acid, the one that's shown here. Here you will see that double bonds are not conjugated. If the double bonds are conjugated, the double bond will be, if you retain the double bond between carbon number 12 and 13, the next conjugated double bond on the right hand side of this molecule will be between carbon number 10 and 11, not between 9 and 10. So yeah, these are not conjugated fatty unsaturated fatty acid, and that's the form of PUFA that we mostly deal with, okay, and consume. But as I said, there are conjugated fatty acids, and sometimes these conjugated fatty acids can have both cis geometry of the double bond as well as trans fatty double bond geometry. And when they are conjugated and part of this polyunsaturated fatty acids, they are not considered trans fat. Okay, just remember that for the dietary purposes. They actually have some health benefits. Okay, so I don't want to go too much, and confuse you further, but just keep that in mind that there are other types of polyunsaturated fatty acids which could also be conjugated. But let's not digress ourselves, okay? So here you are seeing linoleic acid, what happens, right? So if you look at the top of the molecule, right, you can see that this is an 18 carbon polyunsaturated fatty acid where we have two non-conjugated double bonds, both in cis geometry. Okay, fine. So if you have to do regular beta oxidations, you are able to do the same thing, right? You can do 3 rounds of beta oxidation cycle using regular enzymes. So you basically made already 3 acetyl coenzyme A, but once you made that, you are left with this second structure that is shown here from the top, which is, as you notice, cis delta 3, right, and cis delta 6 fatty acid in the activated form. Okay, so if you look here, you know that if in order for the beta oxidation enzymes to work, you have to have the double bond between 2 and 3, right? And that double bond has to be in the trans geometry. Cool? You know that, you can see already. Okay, so that's what enoyl-CoA isomerase does. That's its specialty. Remember, we talked about this enzyme here, right? That's what it does. It basically takes the cis double bond and transposes it to the trans form on the near the carboxy end. Okay, so delta 3, delta 2 enoyl-CoA isomerase will actually move that double bond and make it trans between 2 and 3. Once you have this trans delta 2 and cis delta 6 conjugated fatty acid, polysaturated unfatty acid with the activated, in the activated form, you can easily do at least 1 cycle of beta oxidation, right? Because you see, it's already set up. Okay, so then you will hydrate it and oxidize it, right? So you will do 1 round of beta oxidation. Once you do 1 round of beta oxidation cycle, what will you be left with? You will be left with the fatty acid that will be 2 carbon short now, and a fatty acid that will also be activated with thioester, right? And so that's what they are actually showing you. Well, they are not showing you here, but so let's see here. So let's count our carbons here, 1 and 2. So those will be gone the first cycle, right? And so you will be left with the carbon number 3 here that will be in the thioester form, right? Carbon number 3, which is shown here in the beta, third structure from the top. So that carbon will be now activated, right? So if that carbon is activated, you can actually, so that becomes carbon number 1 right now, right? 1, 2, 3. And so you can see that this first enzyme which will be the, which enzyme? I want to show you. Acyl-CoA dehydrogenase. Remember, that's what it does. It actually oxidizes the single bond to a double bond, trans double bond between alpha and beta carbon, right? So that's what will happen. That's exactly first oxidation of the second cycle will generate a trans double bond between the carbon number 2 and 3. See, if you wrote down how easy it will be, right, for you, but if you didn't, and if you didn't pay attention to what I'm saying, it will be always confusing to you. But that's what you will do, okay? From 12 carbon activated fatty acid to 10 carbon fatty acid that you are producing right in the middle here, you are carrying out one cycle of beta oxidation and the first oxidation reaction of the second cycle. And so that will give you trans delta 2 cis delta 4 double bond. That's what they're showing you here. If you wrote just that, that's alone is enough. You don't have to write the full fatty acids, structure. You are just trying to show that you now have trans delta 2 cis delta 4. And so this kind of system requires this new enzyme called 2,4-dienoyl-CoA reductase, which utilizes reduced form of NADP, which will be NADPH. Okay, as the name implies, 2,4-dienoyl. So you can see it's a diene, right, at 2 position and 4 position. That's why 2,4-dienoyl-CoA reductase is going to reduce using NADPH as the cofactor. All right, so then once you do that, then what happens here? You basically have produced a trans delta 3, right? So it's a 2 double bond gets reduced to 1 double bond, right? So the double bond in the previous substrate was between carbon number 4 and 5 and carbon number 2 and 3. One in the trans geometry and one in the cis geometry. 2,4-dienoyl-CoA reductase will basically reduce one of the double bond and create the trans double bond between 3 and 4. That's what it has done. And if you formally want to see how that reaction could happen, think about it. You can push that double bond to between 3 and 4, right? And then you push that double bond in such a way that at carbon number 2, you are actually, oh, hold on, that will not work because this is a reduction, NADPH, okay? So it will be a transfer of hydride group. So you can imagine that, formally speaking, hydride will attack, let's say, either carbon number 2 or 5, right? And you can push the double bond to create the double bond between 3 and 5. And then the other double bond picks up a proton from a general acid. And that's how you will be able to generate enoyl-CoA, trans delta 3. Right. So once you have trans delta 3, then of course you can take enoyl-CoA isomerase, which will isomerize that 3,4 trans double bond to 2,3 trans double bond. Now students often ask this, enoyl-CoA isomerase, doesn't it actually do a slightly different chemistry? Right. Where is that enoyl-CoA? Yeah, enoyl-CoA isomerase, if you look here, it actually takes the cis bond between carbon number 3 and 4, and it is making a double bond between carbon number 2 and 3, right? That's what enoyl-CoA isomerase does. But enoyl-CoA isomerase can also take slightly different isoforms, can actually take the trans 3,4 double bond or trans delta 3 activated fatty acid and convert it to trans delta 2. And so that's what it does. And then once you have that, again, you can carry 4 rounds of beta oxidation on that to generate 5 molecules of acetyl coenzyme A. So totally from 18 carbon saturated polyunsaturated fatty acids, you at least should make 9 molecules of acetyl coenzyme A, and you can count how that's happening, right? 3 you produce right here on the top reaction. Then you produce 1 in here, 3 and 1 is 4, and then you're producing 5 here at the end, so 9. So that's how polyunsaturated fatty acids are metabolized. Cool, right? All right. So That brings me to very interesting questions that you already asked, right? What happens when you have odd number of fatty acid? One thing again I want to say is that most biological unsaturated fatty acids are in the cis configuration, right? And most of the fatty acid synthesis that happens using the 2-carbon acetyl coenzyme A, and therefore it is not surprising that we have even number carbon fatty acids in most cases. And you'll also notice that when you have unsaturation, it actually begins at the carbon number 9 and 10. And if you have other degrees of unsaturations, they are usually not conjugated, right? Already we are talking about that. So what happens if you have odd number of fatty acids, and how would you consume? So you can actually, consume odd chain fatty acids from plants and marines, etc. And this is a common pathway in plants and marines. And it turns out that, yes, you can still feed those carbons to citric acid cycle, but there are some additional enzymes that are needed. Okay. So remember, so that's what is listed here. Long chain odd fatty acid breakdown starts with same pathway as even ones, beginning at the carboxy end, right? But the substrate for the last cycle of beta oxidation will be a 5-carbon fatty acyl coenzyme A. And when you break that down, it will cleave to give you a molecule of acetyl coenzyme A and a 3-carbon activated fatty acid, which is propionyl coenzyme A, which the structure is shown here in the top right. And so acetyl coenzyme A goes to the citric acid cycle, but propionyl coenzyme A has to work out and try to get converted into a product that can be utilized by the citric acid cycle intermediate. Okay, very cool. So you start out with propionyl coenzyme A. You can see it's a 3-carbon, right? 1, 2, 3 carbon, and it's already activated. That's what you'll produce in the last cycle of beta oxidation. So the first reaction that happens is catalyzed by propionyl coenzyme A carboxylase. Remember pyruvate carboxylase? Very similar enzyme. Look, it's using the same cofactor, biotin and bicarbonate and ATP. We talked about the mechanism, how that reaction could be happening. Very similar enzyme. So propionyl CoA carboxylase will basically carboxylate, put carboxyl group on the propionyl coenzyme A. And once it does that, the molecule is it's done stereoselectively. You can see that the carbon where the carboxyl group is now attached is a chiral carbon, right? 4 different groups. So it is stereoselective, stereochemically selective reaction. And you make what we call D-methylmalonyl coenzyme A. You are making D, not L. Okay, D-methylmalonyl coenzyme A. And so you need to actually convert that to L-methylmalonyl coenzyme A. Okay. So methylmalonyl coenzyme A epimerase will actually take those 2 groups, activated ester of the carboxylate and this carboxyl group newly introduced in the pink. It will switch the position. Okay, epimerase. Basically, D will become then L. Remember, if you have a chiral carbon and you switch any 2 groups, you actually go to the other configuration, right? And so that's what is happening. That's what exactly they are showing you. So you have produced now L-methylmalonyl coenzyme A. And so that will get, that will become a substrate with another enzyme called mutase. Okay. Methylmalonyl coenzyme A mutase. Methylmalonyl coenzyme A mutase, what it will do is it is a mutase enzyme. What it will do is it will intertransfer these two groups on the adjacent carbon, as shown here. The hydrogen in the pink and this activated carboxylate in the blue. See, it's going from the adjacent carbon. That's why it's a mutase enzyme. And it, of course, requires another coenzyme called vitamin B12, cobalamin. So then you actually produce from L-methyl malonyl coenzyme A to succinyl coenzyme A. Succinyl coenzyme A, you know, is a substrate of citric acid cycle. So now that can be utilized in the citric acid cycle to generate ATP. Cool? So that's what happens here. All right. So let's now talk about how fatty acid synthesis and breakdowns are regulated, how they are coordinated. I already gave you sufficient amount of hint, right? That fatty acid synthesis actually happens in the cytosol, and fatty acid breakdowns mostly happens in the mitochondria, right? So how do these processes regulated? Well, one thing for sure is that nature has created these two pathways in such a way that they are compartmentalized properly. You know, synthesis happens in the cytosol, oxidation happens in the mitochondria, right? So let's discuss the scenario here, right? And you can see it's a beautiful slide actually, and you know, if you go through this, you will really, you know, most of the things here. Okay, so but we are just going to go over that. So when you have, you know, let's say you went and ate a really good carb-rich meal, right? And when you had a good carb-rich meal, you know, beta oxidation of fatty acids will be unnecessary. Remember, fatty acids are excellent storage fuel, right? So therefore, the oxidation, beta oxidation of fatty acid must be down-regulated, right? It will be unnecessary. You already have a rich source of carbohydrates in your blood. So high amount of carbohydrate in the blood will actually trigger the release of insulin from pancreatic beta cells, right? So insulin arrow is going up. You see what they're showing? Up, right? So once insulin is levels are up, insulin dependent enzyme protein phosphatase 1, okay? So turns out that there is this enzyme called acetyl-CoA carboxylase. Okay, acetyl-CoA carboxylase is a very, very important enzyme. Okay, this is one of the two most important enzyme that regulates, you know, synthesis versus the breakdown. Okay, the other one already we talked about was carnitine acyltransferase 1, if you recall. So, when you're, you know, so what does acetyl-CoA carboxylase does? It turns out that acetyl-CoA carboxylase, when it is active, it will take acetyl coenzyme A and convert that acetyl coenzyme A to malonyl coenzyme A. Okay, and malonyl coenzyme A is the first committed step. This step, step number 3, acetyl CoA converting to malonyl CoA is the first committed step in the fatty acid synthesis. And so fatty acid synthesis will begin in the cytosol. Why would it begin in the cytosol? Because you want to store away fatty acid. You don't want to oxidize fatty acid. If the fatty acid reserves are depleted, when your meal is rich in carbohydrate, you will bring carbohydrate molecule in, such as glucose shown here. You will carry out glycolysis. You will take the pyruvate, you will run it through pyruvate dehydrogenase complex. You will produce acetyl coenzyme A, and acetyl coenzyme A will then get converted to malonyl coenzyme A and you will synthesize fatty acid and store fatty acids in those adipose tissues, etc., in liver. But to make that conversion, step 3, you must have acetyl-CoA carboxylase activated. Now, if you look here in this slide, right, left-hand side, you will see that acetyl-CoA carboxylase is an enzyme. When it is phosphorylated, it is inactive. And when it is dephosphorylated, it is active. So this is also an enzyme that is post-translationally regulated, right, by phosphorylation mechanism. Which are the two enzymes that actually govern this equilibrium? Insulin-dependent protein phosphatase, and other side is PKA, protein kinase A. Okay. So when insulin concentration is up, insulin-dependent phosphatase will be active. That's why they are showing you green arrow up. And once that happens, phosphatases are active. Whatever ACC is there in the phosphorylated form, that will get converted to the dephosphorylated and therefore active form. And therefore, you will be able to make acetyl coenzyme A, and you will convert it to malonyl coenzyme A. And because it is the first committed step, it must be tightly regulated. Malonyl coenzyme A, if you recall, is a competitive inhibitor of carnitine acyltransferase 1. And so once the malonyl coenzyme A concentration rises, while it will go on to make fatty acids, new fatty acids in the cytosol, it will also go and inhibit. That's why the red X, the first enzyme that actually is involved in bringing fatty acid into the mitochondria for beta oxidation, that carnitine acyltransferase 1 will be inhibited by malonyl coenzyme A. And therefore, activated fatty acid will not be able to come inside the mitochondria for beta oxidation. So that 4 will not happen. That's why red X. Right? So those are the two enzymes, right? Acetyl-CoA carboxylase and carnitine acyltransferase 1. What happens when you have low levels of glucose, low blood glucose level? You know, when you have low levels of blood glucose, your fatty acids will be mobilized from adipose tissues. Remember? How will that be mobilized? First thing will happen is liver will sense that and will stimulate pancreatic alpha cells to release glucagon. Glucagon is the hormone that is released in response to the low blood glucose level. Remember, opposite of insulin. And so when glucagon goes, levels are up, it will go and activate cyclic AMP dependent protein kinase A, PKA. If you recall, we have talked about that signaling a lot. So PKA concentration will rise up. Once PKA activity will go up. Once PKA is activated, it will take acetyl-CoA carboxylase and phosphorylate it to ensure that you are not converting acetyl coenzyme A to malonyl coenzyme A. Instead, you are actually taking acetyl coenzyme A and trying to bring them into mitochondria so they can be metabolized. Okay, so that pathway, basically PK, once it is active, it will phosphorylate acetyl-CoA carboxylase. Once acetyl-CoA carboxylase is phosphorylated, fatty acid synthesis pathway is totally shut down. And in that case, you will not have any amount of malonyl coenzyme A. When you do not have any amount of malonyl coenzyme A, the inhibition of carnitine acyltransferase 1 will be relieved, and therefore you will be able to bring your fatty acid in the activated form via carnitine shuttle into the mitochondria for beta oxidation. Pretty cool, right? I'm sure you are getting excited how this thing works so beautifully. Okay, so yeah, it if you think about it, makes sense, right? oxidation of fatty acid, fatty acids are considered precious storage fuel, and therefore it makes sense to regulate its mobilization as and when it is needed, right? So one thing you can notice here is that you always are excited, very interested in knowing how when we eat carbohydrate, how do we put on weight? And you can see why would you not? Your liver will become fatty, right? Your adipose tissues will become fatty if you keep on consuming excess dietary carbohydrates, because eventually acetyl coenzyme A will get converted to malonyl coenzyme A, and you will start making fatty acids, right? All right. Oh, okay. So this is something that you already know, and I'm not sure why I want to repeat this, but I think it, just for the sake of completion, it might be worth actually just going over it, right? Remember, when insulin is released, what it does, if you recall, insulin will stimulate glycogen synthesis. Okay, glycogen is this polymer of glucose that actually is the main sugar polymer stored in your liver and in your skeletal muscles, right? And so if you recall, insulin, whenever sugar levels are high, insulin will go and bind to the insulin receptor. Insulin receptor cytoplasmic side has a tyrosine kinase activity, right? It will transphosphorylate each other and become active. And then once it is active, it will go and phosphorylate insulin receptor substrate, right, on the tyrosine residue, if you recall. And once insulin receptor substrate is phosphorylated, it will go and bind to this enzyme called phosphatidyl inositol 3 kinase, PI3 kinase. What PI3 kinase will do, it will take PIP2 and convert it to PIP3. This kinase actually hangs around in the membrane, okay, and you can see why. It basically take phosphatidyl inositol 4,5-bisphosphate, which is PIP2, and converts it to phosphatidyl inositol 3,4,5-triphosphate, PIP3. Okay. Once you have PIP3, PIP3 has a binding pocket for this kinase called PDK1. Okay. It will go and bind to an allosteric pocket and activate PDK1 enzyme. PDK1 will then activate PKB, which is the same as AKT, if you recall. We talked about this enzyme as well. AKT or PKB are the enzyme, is the enzyme that actually converts glycogen synthase kinase 3 to a phosphorylated form. The phosphorylated form of GSK3 is the inactive form, right? And so how does insulin stimulate glycogen synthesis? Remember, glycogen synthase itself is active when it is not in the phosphorylated form. When it is phosphorylated form, which will be glycogen synthase B, it is inactive. Okay, so the axis that controls, the two axes that controls the two states of glycogen synthase is GSK3 enzyme on one side, and on the other side PP1 enzyme, right, protein phosphatase 1. And so when the GSK3 is inactive, then PP1 is active, right, protein phosphatase 1 is active, and then it will basically take the glycogen synthase B in the inactive form and dephosphorylate those 3 phosphoryl groups to generate the active form of glycogen synthase, and that's how you will stimulate glycogen synthesis. And if you recall, glucagon, for example, will go and bind to adipose tissues, remember, and will try to mobilize the fats that are stored in those adipose tissues. Very quickly, remember, when the glucagon binds to the receptor, it will activate adenylyl cyclase via a G protein, right? And you will have the second messenger, cyclic AMP, being produced in good amount. Once cyclic AMP concentration rises, it will go and activate pKa. pKa has two functions, if you recall. It will, first thing it will do is it will take go and phosphorylate hormone sensitive lipases, and the second function it will do is it will go and basically phosphorylate this barrier protein that is protecting the stored fat in the form of neutral fat, perilipin. And so once perilipins are phosphorylated, it basically allows the hormone sensitive lipases, which are now in the active form, phosphorylated form, to go and access the lipid droplets and then start to hydrolyze triacylglycerols into fatty acids and glycerol molecule. Fatty acids, by diffusion, they go out, they go and bind to the albumin, the blood serum protein, and they go to their target tissues, which could be a muscle cells, and where they get oxidized by beta oxidation, right? So, okay, so you also recall that triglycerols are the source of glucose, right? In seeds, remember, plants, when they don't see sunlight, like when they are in the form of a seed, they are buried deep under the ground. The fats that are packed into the seeds are the source for the production of sugar molecules to promote the growth of those plants. So plants can come out from the ground and basically then subsequently utilize photosynthesis to license their growth. And so, yeah, so fatty acids, once they're metabolized as acetyl coenzyme A, you run the glyoxylate cycle, if you remember, you'll make oxaloacetate, right? Once you have oxaloacetate, then you can carry out gluconeogenesis and make those sugar molecules that plants can utilize for making their amino acids, energies, DNA, RNA, and all those other intermediates. Okay, so what about when things are not all that great? Okay, when things are not all that great means that unfortunately you are not able to utilize the fuel that you consume. Okay, so the phenomena that I am saying here is that this is the condition where there is starvation of cells in the midst of plenty. Let's say you have lots of food around you, but you can't use it. Your mouth is blocked. You don't have teeth, whatever form. So you are starving, and that's how cells feel. Okay. So if there is a condition of diabetes, type 1 or type 2 diabetes, where your sugars cannot be utilized, right? Remember, brain only likes to utilize sugar as the primary fuel. Okay. Out of 160 gram of sugar we consume every day, 120 gram is utilized by the brain. So brain is a very, very specialized organ, and it wants ready-made food like sugar. And it can utilize under certain circumstances ketone bodies. Remember, fatty acids cannot be utilized by the brain because they don't cross the blood-brain barrier. But it's not like brain doesn't do citric acid cycle. The students sometimes get confused. Okay, it still does. If you feed acetyl coenzyme A, then brain cells can run citric acid cycle and produce energy. Okay, ATP. So just letting you know. So, glucose is abundant in blood, but uptake by cells in muscle, liver, and adipose tissues is very low. So cells are metabolically starved. And when they are metabolically starved, they turn to gluconeogenesis and catabolism of fat and protein. Okay, that makes sense. Think about it. Okay, so when that happens, gluconeogenesis happens. Remember the reactions we talked about, anaplerotic reactions, and we also found out that there is a term called cataplerotic reactions where intermediates of the citric acid cycles can be siphoned away from the cycle, right? So yeah, when you are doing gluconeogenesis, clearly your oxaloacetate concentration will go down because you will try to utilize oxaloacetate to make new glucose molecule using gluconeogenesis. So when you do that, when your pool of oxaloacetate is depleted, remember you can't run efficiently citric acid cycle. You can have tons of acetyl coenzyme lying around, but hey, each of those acetyl coenzyme molecule needs an oxaloacetate, right, to run enter the cycle for metabolism. And so bottom line is that acetyl CoA will accumulate, right? And so when that happens, you basically will make what we call ketone bodies. Your liver will make ketone bodies and try to export those ketone bodies to brain cells, heart muscle cells, some skeletal muscles, and so on. Ketone bodies can be utilized as fuel when things are not great. If you are healthy, if everything is doing well, then ketone body production is at the minimal level. Okay, this is like a dire circumstances scenario that nature has provided us with. Okay, so when you do produce ketone bodies, one of the ketone body is acetone. And in earlier days, when the technology was not all that great and detection of diabetic patients were not readily available, old time doctors, they would just smell the breath of a person and figure out that this person is diabetic. Okay, often you will see that diabetic people, when they are diabetic, they literally lose all of their muscle mass, all those proteins, even fat is all metabolized. They never, you can feed them as much as you want, but if their diabetes is not controlled, they will lose all those muscle mass because they are actually producing lots and lots of ketone bodies, so their brain can still function. Liver is really busy. I just want to also say real quick is that most fatty acid oxidation happens in the mitochondria, okay? But there are some other pathways, okay? If you have, for example, very long chain fatty acids, they can be oxidized in peroxisomes. There is, another organelle in vertebrates that can utilize, can oxidize very, very long chain fatty acids. And when they do that, when the fatty acid oxidation happens in the peroxisome, it actually doesn't generate ATP, okay? Because there are no electron transport chain in the peroxisome, okay? Basically, fatty acids, or any of the coenzymes, they are brought back into the mitochondria using some shuttle systems, and that's how those long, very, very long chain fatty acids can be further metabolized. But let's look at ketone bodies. What happens? Okay, so your liver, mitochondrial matrix will produce ketone bodies if you are not able to utilize normal metabolic pathway. Why? Because, as I said, acetyl coenzyme A will accumulate, right? And once, why would it accumulate? Because your cells will try to do gluconeogenesis to make sure that there is some glucose supply for the blood, for the brain, and your glucose levels in the blood is maintained at around 5 millimolar. Remember, cells will always try to keep your glucose concentration levels constant, ideally in your blood. So gluconeogenesis will happen. When that happens, oxaloacetate pool gets depleted, your acetyl coenzyme will accumulate. Once it accumulates, thiolase is the enzyme that will carry out this reversible condensation reaction of two acetyl coenzyme molecule to generate acetoacetyl coenzyme A. Okay. Acetoacetate acetyl coenzyme A. So look at that. If you look at the acetyl coenzyme structure, you can see that that's the black structure, right? And on that black carbon number 2, you have an acetyl group. So that's why acetoacetyl coenzyme A, right? So acetyl coenzyme A, on that you have aceto group right there. That's how you memorize it, okay? And then what will happen is the second reaction is catalyzed by HMG-CoA synthase, which will take acetoacetyl coenzyme A and another molecule of acetyl coenzyme A and convert that to beta hydroxy beta methyl glutaryl coenzyme A, which is also known as HMG coenzyme A. You don't have to memorize the long name, but you can see it's a beta hydroxy beta methyl and it's a derivative of glutaryl coenzyme A. So once you have HMG coenzyme A, then HMG CoA lyase will basically cleave that molecule to generate acetoacetate and acetyl coenzyme A. Okay, so acetyl coenzyme A is again 2 carbon, and acetoacetate you will see is 1, 2, 3, 4 carbon. So 6 carbon in total. So that's what you have this HMG CoA as well. Acetoacetate is one of the ketone body, one of the 3 ketone bodies. 2 of the 3 ketone bodies can be utilized as fuel. One is simply called as ketone bodies, but is actually not a fuel. Okay. So acetoacetate can be converted into beta hydroxybutyrate by beta hydroxybutyrate dehydrogenase. It's a simple reduction reaction of that carbonyl carbon. Okay, that's how you memorize the structure, beta hydroxybutyrate. You oxidize that secondary alcohol, you make acetoacetate. That's the second ketone bodies. So what are the 3 ketone bodies that are shown here in the red box? Out of those 3 ketone bodies, beta hydroxybutyrate and acetoacetate can be utilized as fuel. Acetoacetate can be decomposed, okay, to acetone and carboxylate. And it turns out that there is an enzyme that can do that, acetoacetate decarboxylase, but you can also spontaneously decarboxylate acetoacetate with a half-life of about 5 hours. Okay, so if your cells are producing acetoacetate and they are not going to be utilized by the cells, okay, this acetoacetate will break down to acetone. Okay, and that's how acetone is very volatile. It gets excreted by your urine or by your breath. Okay, so if your body is not able to use acetoacetate, you can entirely like get rid of it literally by converting it to acetone and carbon dioxide. And so that you can imagine, it's like a use it or lose it scenario. Either you use acetoacetate or you lose it. And that's fantastic, right? So this is what the basis of a ketogenic diet is. Weight loss found in those ketogenic diets, you may have heard. This is the principle that those diets are utilizing. They are actually eating a specialized diet that will produce ketone bodies, and those ketone bodies will eventually, if you don't utilize them, they will get converted to volatile carbons like acetone and carbon dioxide, and they will get excreted. And so you will keep on burning those fat. Okay. And so acetone is responsible for that. It's like a fruity odor. So if you smell the person who is diabetic, you will see the breath of the person will be a little fruity kind of. Okay. And so when we are not able to use citric acid cycle, right? So also I wanted to think about one more scenario. But now that you know everything here, right? Think about it. When carbohydrates cannot be utilized, right? Under metabolic disorder condition, you will break down fatty acids. When you break down fatty acids, you will have higher amount of acetyl coenzyme A present in the cell because your oxaloacetate concentration pool is depleted, right? And so when you have acetyl coenzyme A present in the cell, you remember pyruvate dehydrogenase complex will then be inhibited, right? Because acetyl coenzyme A is a ligand, allosteric ligand, inhibitory ligand for pyruvate dehydrogenase complex. On the same token, when acetyl CoA concentration is up, pyruvate carboxylase will become activated, if you recall. And then once pyruvate carboxylase is activated, any oxaloacetate you have lying around will enter gluconeogenesis rather than being part of the citric acid cycle, right? And so this is all, in the context. This is what I always tell my students. Everything should be able to come together for you at this moment, right? So let's see what happens in the liver. Okay, well, this is again the same thing. I'm just showing you in a different slide form, right? So ketone bodies are overproduced in diabetic patients and people who are starving, right? Right now Ramadan is going on. I'm sure some of you are starving during the day, and your liver is working very hard to ensure that you have ready access to ketone bodies, so you can still understand the lecture of Dr. Pathak. Your brain is still functional when the sugars are not there. That's what is happening. Your liver is working very hard. Liver is also working very hard to carry out gluconeogenesis. So in the pool, oxaloacetate concentration is depleted. Oxaloacetate, so that's what is shown here. Look, left hand side is fatty acid, right? Lipid droplets, they are showing you in the yellow. And it will get mobilized, right, to produce acetyl coenzyme A. But because your cells are starving, oxaloacetate pool is going to be diverted away to make new glucose molecules that can then be exported into the bloodstream or to other tissues that can utilize glucose as a fuel. Your citric acid cycle is not running efficiently, therefore acetyl CoA concentration is going up and up and up. When that is happening in your liver will utilize these sets of reactions catalyzed by thiolase, HMG-CoA synthase, HMG-CoA lyase, and will make ketone bodies, which would be acetoacetate and beta-hydroxybutyrate. And those ketone bodies and acetone Okay, so those three are considered ketone bodies, but remember, acetone doesn't have any energy. Acetone gets excreted typically when acetoacetate is not utilized. It can get converted to acetone, but it's part of the ketone bodies, three ketone bodies. And so once these ketone bodies form, you see that you will also generate coenzyme A. Interesting. Why do you need coenzyme A? You need coenzyme A, remember? You need coenzyme A so you can actually oxidize fatty acid into acetyl coenzyme A, right? You need coenzyme A for your beta oxidation. So that's a good thing. When you are forming ketone bodies, as you will see in this reaction, you see coenzyme A, one in pink and one in blue. You are producing coenzyme A. That coenzyme A can be utilized in the beta oxidation pathway so that you keep on generating acetyl coenzyme A, and therefore you keep on generating ketone bodies that can be exported as energy source for your brain, heart and skeletal muscles, and to some extent specialized cells of your kidneys. Cool? And so released coenzyme A allows continued beta oxidation of the fatty acids, and your ketone bodies are utilized. When you are doing ketogenesis, when you are producing ketone bodies, that state of us is referred to as fasted state. And you can see why, right? Ketone bodies, as I said, some of us are fasting right now in Ramadan. So we are in fasted state. And so our liver will be doing ketogenesis. It will produce new ketone bodies. So students often ask, all right, you produce ketone bodies, but how are the ketone bodies utilized? Right? You produce acetoacetate and beta hydroxybutyrate, and they are made by the liver, and liver is working very hard, released into the blood, goes to the brain, and then how are they utilized? And so that set of reactions is what I'm showing you here. You can take beta hydroxybutyrate and use this dehydrogenase enzyme called beta hydroxybutyrate dehydrogenase that utilizes NAD+ to generate acetoacetate. Remember, that's the same reaction, beta hydroxybutyrate dehydrogenase reaction. This is a reversible reaction, right? So you can take beta hydroxybutyrate and convert that into acetoacetate. Acetoacetate can be converted to acetoacetyl coenzyme A with the help of this enzyme 3-keto-acyl-CoA transferase, which utilizes one of the metabolite of citric acid cycle, succinyl coenzyme A, okay, to produce succinate and acetoacetyl coenzyme A. Remember, succinate is not lost. You take succinyl coenzyme A and make succinate, that's part of citric acid cycle reaction. But in this case, the reaction is different. You take acetoacetate and succinyl coenzyme A, you make succinate, and you make activated form of acetoacetate, which is acetoacetyl coenzyme A. Once you have acetoacetyl coenzyme A, remember what can happen? Once you have acetoacetyl coenzyme A, thiolase, which is the enzyme that can catalyze the reverse reaction to produce acetyl coenzyme A. And so thiolase will actually utilize coenzyme A and produce 2 molecules of acetyl coenzyme A. And that can enter now citric acid cycle in the brain cells and those cells that are going to utilize beta ketone bodies for fuel. All right, so that is what concludes this chapter, chapter 17. I hope you had a lot of fun, and let me stop the recording here.